All right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to stop doing what you're doing right now. I want you to go and find your latest Eversource bill or your latest National Grid bill, whatever utility company that you have here in Massachusetts, pretty much. Pull it up on your phone, go to the website, go on your computer, go on your iPad, whatever you have, okay? Pause the video and then come back. Do you see the numbers that are on your bill? Do you know what these represent? The total on these numbers is outrageous. They've basically recently, since November, itemized on how we are getting screwed every single month. Now, I want you to imagine this. Actually picture this for a second, that your bill is a loan, a 30-year loan or a 50-year loan that you never applied for, that you can't refinance and that you cannot get out of, and potentially that you won't see a single dollar benefit from this until the year 2056 or more. Now, if you think I'm exaggerating, I'm not, because I brought the receipts. And I'm going to show you just how this is playing out. I'm going to show you exactly who approved this and who is profiting from it, and why Governor Maura Healey is now all of a sudden is calling this outrageous when she is the sole architect or one of the architects of why we have to deal with this, okay? This isn't some conspiracy theory or something like that. This is Massachusetts energy policy in 2025. And it is probably one of the biggest scams I've ever seen happen in this state. It's absolutely outrageous. Maura Healey is right. It is outrageous. But when you're the architect of these things, you can't have it both ways. And that's the way that it goes. And that's the reason I'm filming this video. Now, what we're going to go over today, I would say number one is going to be why your bill keeps on increasing. And it's not only because of market rates, and it's not only because of winter demand. I'm going to show you the exact line items that you're paying for that have nothing to do with keeping your lights on, okay? Number two, the $400 billion plus plan that really not many people talk about. Not many people talk about this, and how Eversource and DPU, Maura Healey, has carved out upwards of $22 to $24 billion that you're paying for in every single bill that you do pay. And that's effectively about the down payment. I'm going to show you the full bill for Massachusetts net zero fantasy and when you'll actually break even, if you actually ever break even. Number three, the Maura Healey flip-flop. How she went from a warrior of the ratepayer back maybe when she was attorney general, okay, and fighting tooth and nail, with DPU in hearings, to approving the biggest grid spending plan in the state's history. This is, of course, right after Eversource executives hand her over $45,000 in campaign cash. Number four, who is actually benefiting from this? Because it's not you, it's not me, and it's not your neighbor whose bills just doubled. And number five, we're going to talk briefly about what I think that you could actually do to make some noise and to get some change. We've done a lot of work here, okay? We've done a lot of work on energy. I know a lot of you may not agree with all of my viewpoints here, but when it comes to energy, I may not be 100% right, but I'm also not 100% wrong. Mass Fiscal Alliance, Paul Craney, Elijah D'Souza from Citizens Against Eversource. There is an entire coalition of people that are upset with what the hell is going on here. And you know it's got to be bad when the same people that voted for Healey are condemning her for how high the energy bills are today. So, first of all, let's talk about why your bills have effectively exploded. This all started, well, it's been happening for a while, but here's how it went. Back in January of 2025, you open your bill and you're probably thinking, what the hell is going on here? We have a 12.3% higher cost on electricity and roughly about a 13 to 17% higher cost on gas. Now, you might have thought to yourself, maybe it's just the winter and maybe the prices just went up. You're not entirely right and you're not entirely wrong. That spike was the supply rate bomb that Eversource dropped back in August of 2024 before their fancy new plan was ever fully approved. They jacked up the commodity price, and in January, that was the first full month that you felt this, okay? This was back in January. Plus, we did have a cold snap that pushed the usage through the roof. But here's what happened next. Starting this past summer, and now showing up on your bills in November, Eversource quietly tacked on another $10 to $15 a month for their $22 to $24 billion electric sector modernization plan. Now, this is on top of the hit that you already took. This included things like the smart meters that we're paying for, the new substations that we're paying for, and wiring for electric cars and solar panels that we are paying for that you probably don't even have or have yet. The DPU, which is Governor Healy's own appointees, they basically rubber stamped this back in August of 2024. This was a plan that was getting flushed out over the last few years. So you just paid for a future grid that doesn't even exist yet, and the tab is only getting bigger. This isn't the fault of winter. This is the fault of policy. If you don't have an EV, it doesn't matter. You are funding the charging stations. If you don't have solar panels yet, too bad. You are paying to upgrade the grid so your wealthy neighbors can. Second, there is something, and I've talked about this before, the ISO New England's regional build-out. This report's many, many pages. This is the big one when it comes to offshore wind farms that aren't built yet. There are transmission lines that don't exist and battery storage facilities that are still on paper and not necessarily in practice. Massachusetts' share of the ISO New England infrastructure and, let's say, green plan is roughly $400 to $500 billion through 2050. That's right. Billion, okay? That's billion with the B. Now, third, we have MassSave, which I've scrutinized here before. This is the state's energy efficiency program. That is absolutely mandatory. You cannot opt out of this thing. And it's a line item on every single bill here in Massachusetts. They take about $1.6 billion from the ratepayers. Out of that sum, about 30% goes to administration. Bigger government means more and more money, basically. That's covering overhead, paperwork, salaries from people that are basically working on this program. The other 70% is going into the rebates that mostly, at least according to our state auditor's report, is going to wealthy homeowners in suburbs who could afford to drop $10,000 to $20,000 or $15,000 on a new heat pump. Now, if you're a renter, guess what? You get nothing. You are effectively screwed. If you are working or if you are living in a working class city or neighborhood, you are subsidizing Wellesley. So when people ask me, Mike, why is my bill so high? It's because you are not paying for electricity. You are paying for 2050. You are paying for a plan that won't benefit you. It'll maybe benefit your kids. And that's a big maybe, okay? That is a big maybe, and that is with absolute ideal modeling scenarios. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, onto the $400 billion timeline scam. Let's talk about this, okay? Because these are real numbers here. Because Eversource loves to talk about their $22 billion plan, which of course we are paying for today and we have been paying for ever since the beginning of the year. The governor, she also loves to talk about investments in clean energy. Look, everybody wants clean energy, okay? But it depends on what the cost is, and it depends on if there is a net benefit. And that is the reason of this video. Nobody wants to talk about the totals out loud, and that's why we, meaning you and I, are here. Massachusetts' share of the full net zero build out, which is generation, transmission, distribution, all of it is upwards of $422 to $434 billion. Now, this is, of course, based on ISO New England's 2024 economic study. These are not my numbers. These are their numbers. And here is a rough breakdown. We have 22 to 24 billion for Eversource, their local upgrades, 250 to $300 billion for offshore wind, for solar fields, for batteries and battery storage, and maybe small nuclear reactors. We know that's never going to happen here. Then there's another 50 to 75 billion for the transmission lines to connect to everything, and then another 23 to 26 billion for extra transmission costs that the DPU quietly admitted that we'll need to add in. So we're roughly around 434 billion. Now, this is for one state, by the way. These are also very, very conservative estimates, okay? So that is around $700 to $900 per household per year by 2035. And this is every single year. So that's extra money that you're paying every single month on top of what you're already paying. But here's my main concern. This is the problem here. Even if everything goes absolutely perfect, meaning every wind turbine spins on schedule, every heat pump that they need gets installed, every federal subsidy comes through, you don't break even. Again, perfect scenario. You do not break even until 2056. 2056. That's breaking even. That's 31 years from now. I'll be in my 70s if I make it that long. Most of you watching this will either be retired or in the grave, okay? I hate to say it, but it's the truth. Your kids will be middle-aged. You are taking out a 30-year loan that you didn't ask for to fund a plan you didn't vote for and that you will never personally benefit from. I'm all for paying it forward, okay? I understand these things. But the problem is when you complain and when you call your representative and say, hey, I can't afford this, they basically tell you to go pound sand or that this is for a future that they can't even quantify the data on if it's going to be a net positive or a net negative. They tell you it's for the planet. They tell you to trust the process. Meanwhile, the Eversource CEO is making anywhere of like $15 to $19 million a year, and the CFOs who are donating to Healy's campaign, guess what? They're doing just fine. They're doing absolutely fine. So now let's talk about Healy's flip-flop on this, because this is where the hypocrisy starts to kick in. When she was Attorney General, this was back between the years of 2015 to 2022, she was or some people's champion. She tried to fight Eversource, and she tried to fight them tooth and nail. She was there at the DPU hearings. She blocked a $96 million electric rate hike in 2017, and she saved us around $50 million. She killed also two major pipeline projects because she said Massachusetts doesn't need any more fossil fuel infrastructure. This was like the beginning of the change, by the way. And people loved her for this. They absolutely loved her for this. But go talk to those same people now and see what their opinion is. I could tell you, it's not very good, even though she stood up to the utility companies. But then she becomes governor in 2023. And suddenly, her appointees at the Department of Public Utilities, which is the agency that's supposed to protect the ratepayers, they approve Eversource's $22 billion plan in August of 24. That's the plan where I said the rate hike started back in January of 25. And that was with no questions asked. This was to upgrade our infrastructure. Excuse me. I've been sick, which is to help with the new transmission lines and all of that other stuff that we're basically financing, okay? And she basically let them charge whatever they want. And now, all of a sudden, she's calling the rate hikes outrageous. I'll actually play the clip for you really quickly here. This is what she said.
I just saw Eversource's proposal. It's outrageous. People can't afford it. It's way too high. So I'm going to be urging the DPU to really scrutinize this proposal.
Starting November 1st, EGMA customers could see a monthly increase of 17% compared to last winter. That's about...
Now, the reason that this is outrageous is probably because it wasn't part of the initial plan. And now she has to stomach the burden of her doing. You see what I'm saying? This is stuff that they did not anticipate. So, of course, now she's calling it outrageous. And you know what else happened after this? Eversource, their employees, they donated over $45,000 to Maura Healey's campaign between the years of 2016 and 2025, with the majority of that money coming over the last few years. She is the number one recipient of donations from Eversource ever. Number one. And here is the timing to shed some light on this. She had $24,000 of that coming to her during her 21 to 22 run for governor. Then she had another 8,000 plus that came in 2024. And as of 2025, when the ESMP was being filed and approved, okay? I'm not saying that this is illegal because it's not, okay? Individual donations are perfectly legal in Massachusetts. But come on, guys. The CEO writes you a check. The CFO writes you a check, then your people approve a $22 to $24 billion plan so Eversource could upgrade their infrastructure. This is infrastructure, by the way, that we don't necessarily or didn't necessarily need, but we need it now because of all of the, let's say, environmental concerns and going green with windmills and solar and all of that stuff. I don't know if this is a coincidence or not, but I figured I would bring it up, okay? Now, the Eversource executives are the ones to thank for this, okay? That's basically what it came down to. And here is part of what I would call their equity scam and who is actually really getting screwed here, because it's not everybody equally. So the worst of the worst, I would say, is renters. And we have a lot of renters here in Massachusetts because nobody could afford to buy a damn house anymore. I would know because I sell houses, okay? You are paying for upgrades, meaning these tenants are paying for upgrades that they will never potentially benefit from. Your landlord's not going to install a heat pump. Your landlord's not going to put solar panels on the roof, but you are still paying into the Mass Save program every single month. And Mass Save gives rebates to the homeowners, not necessarily to the renters. So you are subsidizing somebody else's energy savings while your own bills go up. How is that fair, guys? How is that possibly fair? And then on top of that, if you live in a working class city or working class neighborhood, Fall River, Lawrence, Brockton, New Bedford, you name it, you are subsidizing the wealthy suburbs because the people in Wellesley and the people in Lexington and the people in Newton, they could afford a $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 heat pump. They could afford that upfront cost. They could afford the solar panel installation. They could afford the EV charger installation, and they are the ones that are getting the rebates back. They get the tax credits. They see their bills go down. You just are paying for more, basically forever. There was a study that came out back in September of 2025. This was the Mass Save Municipal Impact Study. Do you know what this found? It found that 30% of the $1.6 billion, which is the Mass Save budget, goes towards administration costs, like I mentioned earlier, not to actual efficiency improvements, to overhead. And the benefits, they flow overwhelmingly to higher income areas. Environmental justice communities, the state, is basically the state's own term for low-income neighborhoods, they are paying in more than they are getting back. That is not a clean energy transition. And I understand these things are not perfect, okay? I understand that. But this is some kind of wealth transfer. That's what it is, from the poor to the rich, funded by your electric bill and your gas bill. And that's the way that it goes. So now, let's talk about the big one here. Let's talk about some of the odds. What are the chances that this actually works? Now, remember, if you use some kind of, and I'm sure that they did not do this, some sort of, modeling scenario or some sort of modeling software, I would think that the goal is to charge the ratepayers so you could pay for a future so that the future ratepayers could save. Okay, this was part of ISO New England's forecasts, DPU filings, and some independent analysis. And here's what we are looking at, okay? If you look at what I would consider the absolute best case scenario, this is assuming everything goes according to plan. Absolutely everything. The wind farms get built on time. 300,000 homes install heat pumps by 2035. 550,000 people buy electric cars, and that the federal subsidies cover 30% of the cost, then you break even. You break even by 2045. Again, you break even by 2045. So essentially, you won't see a full payback of your investment until about 2056. And that is the best case scenario. The middle case scenario looks like this. Let's assume we have delays. Let's assume that the inevitable happens. Let's assume that costs overrun by about 15 to 20% because of inflation or because of supply chain restraints or issues. And only 15% of the homes electrify instead of the necessary, this is necessary to reach perfect results, 25%, which results in, or to a break even, getting pushed to around 2065. So your kids will probably still be paying this off while they are collecting Social Security, if that even still exists. Now, the worst case scenario, if there is any major failures like Revolution Wind, they almost got canceled, by the way. They stopped work for weeks back in 2025, and who knows if something like that will repeat itself or not. Let's also assume that costs balloon up to, let's be conservative here. Let's say they balloon another 75 or 100 million, maybe up to billion. Let's assume up to 500 to 550 billion, okay? And less than 12% of the homes decide to electrify because people can't afford it, or they don't want it, or they don't need it. Well, then there's absolutely no payback, ever. You just funded a system that does not work. I think that there is roughly a 60% chance that this thing goes absolutely sideways unless there is some sort of revolutionary breakthrough in technology. But to be honest, when I'm sitting here talking and thinking about this, if there is some sort of revolutionary jump in the technology, we may have already installed outdated technology. You see what I'm saying? So look at it this way. Would you invest your retirement savings in something that has a 60% chance of failure? Would you bet your kid's college fund on these odds? I think the answer to that is absolutely not. But you don't have a choice. And that is the key here. Nobody has a choice. And they are betting with your money, whether you like it or not. Now look, here is a suggestion. I'm going to tell you at least what I've seen be somewhat effective. Let's say. First of all, you could flood the DPU. The Department of Public Utilities, they have a public comment section, and they may read them, but they may not respond to those comments. You could go to their website, you could leave a comment. You could also send them an email and tell them your story and share a copy of your bill and tell them, why am I using $20 of electricity, but I'm being charged $120 for delivery, okay? You need to make noise. You need to make noise on this. I would tag Maura Healey in every single social media post that you make and post every single screenshot of this. Make it a trend and make it embarrassing. Then you should also try to get out of the Mass Save program, okay? I think more people need to initiate some sort of, some sort of legislation or something where it's like opt-in, okay? Call your senators, okay? Tell them you want a choice to opt out because right now you don't have one. And I also think that we should demand a line-by-line audit on where every single dollar is going. I don't know if this is something the state auditor could take a look at, but I think this is something that is absolutely necessary to see who is benefiting the most, okay? Make them show the receipts. And last but not least, this is the biggest one, guys. You need to vote, okay? You need to vote. If your representative voted for this, if they are defending Eversource, if they are taking donations from utility executives, you need to vote them out. Period. End of story. You need to vote these people out. That's the only language that they understand. That's it. Because right now, they are counting on you being too tired, too confused, too lazy, or too broke to fight back. Don't give these people any satisfaction. None. Okay? Don't give them any satisfaction. That's it for today's video, guys. I hope this made sense, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.